What's going on, you guys, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to continue from where we left off in the last video, where we set up our T3 project. We got authentication working, so we can now sign in if we want with GitHub. So we added in our GitHub credentials. So I can just go ahead and click that, and I'm signed in. So I'm signed in as myself, and it gives me a nice little secret message once I'm in. And as well, I can also sign out. Now we also, we created our Supabase database, and if you've already set up the way we set up in the last video, then if you head over to your Supabase database, you will see that if you go into the users table, you will see that you already have a user added in there. You can also check for a session. In our case, I have no session because I've signed out, but if you were to sign in, you'll get one. You also have an account in there as well, which is linked to your user, as well as other tables such as example, which we migrated last time. Other than that, we also created our OAuth tokens on GitHub to make sure that we can authenticate ourselves. You could probably try out Google or Discord as well if you want to do that. It would work pretty much the same way, but GitHub's pretty easy to set up, so we went with that. So in this video, we're going to set up the layouts. So we're going to start getting our AI journaling app into a good front end position so we can start building the back end out in the future videos. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is first install hero icons. And hero icons, we'll need this to add in our burger menu, add in like certain icons to our web application. This is just a quick installation that we need to do. And you can do that by doing npm install at hero icons /react. So I'm just going to copy that, head over to my terminal, and then I'm just going to stop this, paste that in. And all right, so that's our hero icons in there. Now, before we start developing or continuing our development, I just want to run through what we already have in the index.tsx file. So we first have this hello equals API example.hello user query, use query, and then text from TRPC. So what the hell is this? This is us making use of a TRPC function that we saw that came with the T3 stack, and that's this one here. So we're basically passing in this value from TRPC into it, so as the text, and then as a result it's returning greeting hello input text. So that's this hello here, and then if you go down a bit, you can see where exactly this is being accessed, which for me is on line 48. It's doing hello.data. If there is data, then show the query, show the greeting, otherwise load TRPC query. And if we head back to our application, we should see that right there. You can see it being displayed on the front end. So it's very easy to make calls to our TRPC routers. Remember, I say routers because this is part of this example router, which has three of the functions: hello, get all, and get secret message. So that's like a very basic example of how TRPC works. And if you go down and further down, we also have this auth showcase. Here we're using this hook called use session, and that use session, as we'll see in a second as well, just checks to see whether or not a user has been authenticated. And then it gets this session data out of it. And down here, we're making another call to our our TRPC router example, and we're stating that we want to access get secret message, and we're only calling that if the session data is not undefined. So we're saying that only call this if a user has been authenticated. That's the English translation of what's written here. Then we get the secret message, and then it displays it. And if you go back and you sign in, and the reason why it's not working is because we haven't got it started. So npm run dev. So if I head back now, just hit refresh on that. Let's go back, sign in with GitHub. And now we get this secret message. And that's because this get secret message function is a protected procedure. So it will only work if you're authenticated. This is why they've added this enabled, because otherwise you're just going to get some errors, because it's going to try and call that a user will not be authenticated, and so it won't know what to do with the return. But all right, let's go ahead and actually, before we finish that up, a cool thing that comes with NextAuth is this sign out and sign in function. So again, we don't have to deal with like the authenticating a user ourselves. This just comes out of the box, which is pretty cool. But all right, let's go back to the top and start styling out our application. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this hello router. We don't need it for now. And then down here, I'm going to go ahead and call this journal, like so. Description, let's give it a nice description, or content for the meta tag. Say an AI journaling app. And then what I'm going to do is get rid of all of this main here. And where is it? There we go. Let's delete that. Save. And let's go ahead and just add in an empty div for now. All right, so if we head back to the application, we just get a white screen. I wanted to have like a rather dark kind of theme going on. It is AI, so it has this kind of technology vibe sort of thing going with it as well. The other thing is I have a background which I created myself. I already added it into the project. You guys can do the exact same thing. You can download it from the GitHub, or you can add your own, or you don't even have to use a background for that matter. But I have this background.png added into my public file. So what I'm going to do is use that as the main background for the homepage. So here I'm just going to go ahead and first add in the Tailwind classes. So I'll say flex. We want to take up the entire screen. We want the items to be in the center, and the background to cover, and the background to be in the center as well. And then what we can do is say style, and then we can just pass in the background image like so, the background image, and then do URL and just do / and then background, because it's in the public directory. So all you have to do is do / background and it'll know where to find it. And there we go. So if we head back, we have now this nice kind of gradient shaded background. The only issue I have right now is that if we scroll a bit too much or a bit too further, like too down, we have this kind of white markings, or this white background, which we want to get rid of because it kind of contrasts a bit too much with our background image. So what we're going to do is in global.css, just going to go ahead and say body and apply the background apply. We'll say BG gray, give it 950, should work. If we head back now, it's a lot better. All right, so that's the background image sorted out. The next thing is adding some content on here. Now, what I want is to add like a journal here. So it says journal right there, and then I want the text, some subheading underneath it, and then a nice sign in, sign out button right underneath it as well. So what we can do is in here, let's go ahead and add our div tag, and we'll say class, and we'll do M auto because we want it in the center. Margin top, we'll give it like a 64. Flex column, and justify it in the center. Gap, say 5, and text center, align middle. And then here we'll say H1, and we'll add in journal like so. Let's just give it a color for now. So class name, we'll just say text white, and give it a size of 7XL. Let's go back now, and we have this journal right in the middle. However, I'm not a big fan of this font, so what we're going to go ahead and do is add a couple of fonts into our next app. And it's really easy if you haven't done it already with Next.js, because Next.js already comes with a set of Google fonts that you can use. So yeah, we don't have to deal with setting up fonts the hard way. So what we can do is in the pages folder in underscore app, let's go ahead and import the fonts that we want. So we'll say import, and then from next / font and / Google. And the fonts I'm going to go ahead and use are Poppins and Montserrat. All right, now let's go ahead and define the settings, so what we want out of each one. So in the Poppins one, we'll say Poppins, and then we'll say subsets, Latin. We'll say the weight. Now, I'm not really 100% sure what weight we're going to use, so I'm just going to pick a nice range and 800. And we'll give it a variable name, which we'll set to -- font -- Poppins, like that. Let's do the same for Montserrat. And we'll say Montserrat. If I'm pronouncing it right, I don't even know if I'm saying that properly. But anyway, subsets. We want Latin. And then we'll also say the weight is going to be 300. Variable, we'll give that font and Montserrat, like that. And make sure that is a colon, not a semicolon. All right, so now we need to kind of feed this into our application. So we'll add a div around our session provider and paste that in. So we'll say class name, and then we'll use our backticks. Oops, I always get this one wrong. And in there we'll say $ curly brackets. And first we want the Poppins font and we want the variable. Then we also want the Montserrat one as well. Dot variable. Just remember, you don't make sure you don't add like a comma. I'm only saying that because I've done that in the past and it took me a while to figure out what went wrong. So yeah, just make sure you add it in like I added it in here. And then finally, we need to feed it into our Tailwind. And I already added it in here, but what we can do is maybe just say font family, and inside Tailwind config, we'll say Poppins, and we'll add var -- font -- Poppins, and then it's sans serif and Montserrat var, and then -- font Montserrat, if spelled correctly. And then that's also sans serif. All right, so that's our fonts all in there. And just to make sure it works, let's go ahead and back in the index.tsx file, let's go ahead and apply it. So we'll say font. And for this, why don't we go for a Poppins? Let's try that out. Say Poppins. Now if we go back to our app, refresh, it seems to be in there. Let's make it stand out a bit more. Let's say font extra bold, give it this nice juicy look. All right, so one cool thing I want to do is add like a nice kind of gradient to this text, and there's a way to do that with Tailwind. However, it takes a couple of uses of the class or the classes. So first I'm going to go ahead and say bg gradient, and we'll do this to the bottom right. Then we'll say from white, and let's just get rid of this text white as well. We don't need that anymore. So from white, and we'll say to a slate-ish color 600. We'll add a box decoration slice along with BG clip text, and then we'll give it some padding as well and set text to transparent. So what we're doing is adding a background behind our text, and we make our text transparent so it gives it the look that we want of a gradient behind it. So that's a nice way of adding like a nice gradient to our text. Next thing I want to do is add our subheading. So I'll say H2 and then your AI journal, and then let's just add in the classes. So we'll use a Montserrat for that. Text we'll set to 5XL and text neutral 100. So we can read it, head back, and there we go. And the final thing I want to add is our button, our sign in, sign out button. And we want it to work as well because we already have authentication working, so we may as well add it in. So I'm going to go ahead and back at the top, I'm going to go ahead and say const, and we're going to use that use session hook that comes with next auth. And here we'll say data, and we'll just set that to the name session data for good practice so we know exactly what this is. And then down below here we can go ahead and say if there is session data, then I want to sign out. Otherwise I want it to say otherwise I want it to say sign in. And there we go. So if we head back, we see it just faintly underneath the your AI journal. Let's go ahead and add some style to it. So we'll say class name, and the class name is, we'll say MX Auto rounded SM. I'll give BG gradient to bottom right again, and we'll say from indigo, say 500, just give it a nice kind of purplish look, to indigo 600. Give it a padding across the X of 20, padding across the Y of say 2. Let's use pop-ins for this. Let's set the text to be 2XL. Font, so we'll say bold, and text, we'll give it a neutral 50. And shadow, why not? Let's add a bit of a shadow. Let's go back now. There we go. We have our sign out button because we're already signed in. If I click on this, nothing's going to happen. Why? Because we need to add the functionality to when we do click on it. So on button, we can say on click, and we'll say if there is session data, then if you do click it, we want to call the sign out button. So void sign out. Otherwise, if you do click it, we want void sign in. All right, and yeah, let's just make sure this is a function call. So there we go. Now if we head back, click sign out, I'm signed out, it's going to signed in. Click it again, sign in with GitHub, yes. And there we go. So that pretty much sets up our homepage. We can sign in and out just like we did before, but now we've added some nice sexy style to it. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and build out our navigation bar. All right, so for the navigation bar, what I want is for it to only show when a user is signed in, because otherwise there's no real point to navigate the website. We're only going to add a few pages anyway, and those pages are just going to be for authenticated users. So back inside our code base, I'm going to go ahead and in source, I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder and call this one components. Now, if I create a new file within that, I'm going to call it navigation.tsx. All right, so let's get the basic stuff in there. So navigation, and we'll return nav. All right, so what do we want? First, we want like a nice title in there, so journal in there as well. And we also want to style it in the correct way. So I'm going to go ahead and say class name, and we'll say this is going to be flex. We'll add it, give it a flex of column for mobile and a flex of row for the desktop or anything bigger. So flex row like that. All right, that's our, why is that there? I always get a bit annoyed when that shows up. And in here, let's go ahead and add a div. And for this, we're gonna have our link. So let's go ahead and type in link. If you type link in like that, you should get an import for that. And that's our link tag or our A tag, basically. That's the way it works. That comes from Next.js. So in here, I'm just gonna go ahead and say journal like so. And let's say href. So you have to add that in, otherwise it will complain. It's going to be the home page, and we'll say, yeah, we'll just say leave it at that for now. And underneath it, we're also going to add a div tag, and this is going to only be this. We're going to use our icons here, so we'll say div, and then we'll say x mark icon, and we need to import this as well. So let's go ahead and import our icons. So remember with hero icons, what we had here. So make sure you install this npm install hero at hero icons / react. So here, let's go ahead and say import from, say, at hero icons react /24 / solid. And then we'll get the X mark icon, and we'll also get the bars 2 icon. All right, so just down here, I'm gonna go ahead and set the width to say about 30 so we can see it's a nice size. And we'll do the same for bars 2 icon. So when it's open, we're gonna show this, and when it's closed, we're gonna show the bars 2 icon. So we do need a use state in there as well. So we'll say const and then is open, and then set is open, use state, and then set it to false to begin with. So is open, we'll have it as show the X mark icon. Otherwise, show the bars 2 icon like so. And width, we'll set it to 30 as well. All right, so if we go back now, we haven't added it into our app, so we also have to add that in too. So in the underscore app file, we'll go ahead and just underneath the session provider, we'll say navigation, whoops, like so. And the reason why we cannot detect it is because we need to export it here, export default navigation. Oops, what is wrong with me? Navigation. There we go. Now in here we can, maybe it does pick it up now. Yep, import from here. And if you've noticed as well, in this case, like it's importing it with the at / as we defined in the first video when we set up our project. This is what I want as the prefix of the imports. So now if we go back to our application, we can see here that there is our navbar sort of showing up. All right, let's go ahead now and start cleaning it up and start making it look good at least. So in the nav, let's go ahead and first I want it to be absolute. Then we'll give it a left of 0, a top of 0, and a Z index of 10, because we'll have it sticky. Then we'll say we have our flex column. We'll set the width to be full. And then we'll say item center just to make sure that they are aligned. We'll have justify between. So give it a gap of 8, at least for the mobile version. We'll give it a background of slates, say 950, say P7. So padding 7 all around, backdrop blur, say around medium. Give it a background transparent, and we'll say on a desktop it's going to be fixed. And what else do we have? Yeah, we'll say on a desktop that the gap is going to be 0 as well. So if I save that now and head back, you can just about see, if you zoom in a bit maybe, that we have our journal and we have this burger icon or the 2 bars icon. All right, let's go ahead and sort that out. So in our div tag right underneath the nav bar, we need the following. So class name, flex, we'll say width full, we'll center them, we'll say justify between, give them some space. We head back now and have a look. We should see the 2 bars on the right side of the navigation bar now. You just about can see them. Maybe we should add some color to it as well. So we'll say text neutral, say 100. Go back, now you can see it. We also want it to have a nice font, so we'll use font pop-ins for that. We'll have text Excel, so it can be readable. We'll say font bold, give it a lowercase just to make sure that it remains lowercase. Tracking, we'll say tight just to give it that extra look. And we'll say on a desktop or anything bigger, we'll give it a text of 4XL. So now if we go back, we have a nav bar coming along. Now this, we only want to see this when the mobile view is on. So what we can do is just where we have this div, let's add a class, and then we'll say flex, and then on a desktop we'll say hidden. Or if I can spell hidden. Now if we head back, it is gone. But if we were to turn this into a mobile, then we'll see that it's there now. So this might be a bit too small screen wise. So now you can see here that we have it. All right, now we need to add some functionality to that. So what we'll do is in the code, we'll say that if the div is clicked on, then we'll set it to open. So on click, and I'm adding this to the div. The set is open, and then set that to the negative value. So now if we go back, if we click on it, you can see it changing now. All right, but now we need to add the values to the, actually I'll set it to that for now. We need to add the values to our navigation bar, so the other links. So what we'll do is underneath this div here, so between the div and the nav bar, let's add a unordered list, and we'll add in our first link. So we'll say link, and we'll say href, oops, not in there, but in here, href, and we'll just give it we'll set it to home for now. This is going to be the entries one, so we'll say entries here. We're also going to have one for the writing section, so we'll say write, and then we'll add a button here, and this button is just going to be log out, and we'll set this to a class of width min. It will kind of look like a link, but it will act more like a button, because that way this is very easy to call the sign out function that we did before. And remember, this is just saying log out because we're only showing this navigation bar when the user has been authenticated. So we go back now, we don't see much. If I just close this, do we have some values in there? We do right here. We have entries, write, and a logout. So let's go ahead and clean that up. So for the unordered list, First, let's say that this is going to be flex, and we'll have it as flex column on mobile, but on anything bigger than a desktop or desktop or bigger, we'll say flex row. Let's also give it a nice text, so neutral, I can spell neutral, text, neutral, say 100. Then let's just justify it. So we'll say, actually, let's just have a look at what this looks like. So there we go. We have that. Let's just change the font first. Font Surat. And let's say on a desktop items center, on desktop, we'll say justify end. And we'll say a gap of 20 on a desktop as well. But on a mobile, we'll say gap of say 8. Oops. We go back, there we go. We have our navigation looking pretty slick. So now if I go into this, you can see that we still see it. And so what we want to do is add a conditional in there so that if it is open and we're on a mobile size, then it will have hidden in there too. So what we can do is in this class here, I'm going to go ahead and change this and throw these into curly brackets. And then just around that, put these backticks and go ahead and add in our conditional. So we'll say that if it is not open, so not open, then we'll say hidden and then MD flex. All right, so now if we were to check that out, open it, you see it, close it, open, close, open, close. So that's working now. And if we just hit X, so if we click on any of these, it will just keep us where we are. But if we click on log out, just to make sure, yeah, we need to add in our log out functionality on this too. So we'll say on click brackets, call void sign out. And it just automatically imported that for me. And here we go. All right, so that's the navigation bar working. Now, as I stated, we want to have the navigation to show only when a user has been authenticated. So how can we go ahead and do that? Well, here we can go ahead and just say const and then data, session data equals use session. So we can use a session hook inside our navigation bar, and we'll just say if the session data is there, then we'll return it. So let's just chuck all of this into that if. Paste, there we go. Now we can see it. So if I click on log out on here, logged out and the navigation bar is gone. Sign in with GitHub, and we can see it. All right, so that's our navigation bar sorted out. Now let's go ahead and set up the entries page. All right, so for the entries page, what we're gonna go ahead and do is back in our project, we're gonna go ahead and create a new, zoom in, don't know why that zoomed out. We're gonna go ahead and create a new folder inside pages. So just right click pages, new folder, and we're gonna create one called entries, like so. And in there, we're gonna create a new file and we'll call this index.tsx. And then just call this one entries. And then return, let's just return a H1 for now. It says hello. All right, and before I forget, export default entries. And now if we go back and we go to /entries, we now have this page. Somewhere over there, it says the word hello, but our entries page is now live. And what I want also is when we go /entries/ and then some ID, I want it to take us to a given entry by the user that signed in. So we'll just go ahead and set that page up now as well. Inside entries, click new file, and then square brackets, PID, close square brackets, .tsx. And that's just the Next.js pattern of creating sort of single page or single object based pages, if you like. And in this, we're just going to call this entry and then return. And here we'll just add another H1 and say hello as well. And let's just export that and say entry. Now if we go back and just hit refresh, so the entries, like the single entry page is working along with our entries page. And on this page, we're going to list out all the entries by the user that's signed in. Otherwise, if they don't have any entries, we're also going to show a kind of no entries, you have no entries kind of indicator. So let's go ahead and start off with our entries page. So inside index.tsx of the entries directory, the first thing that we're going to do is make sure that a user has been authenticated. So we don't want any unauthenticated user on this page. So what we'll do is say const, and then we'll use the hook use session, and that's been automatically imported for me. Say status, and we'll say session status, like that. And then what we'll have is a use effect, and this use effect is going to check on the session status. So this use effect will run every time the session status changes. And then we'll say if session status equals, so triple equals, and then unauthenticated, then we want to redirect them to the home screen. Now to redirect them, we need to use the use router hook that comes with Next.js. So we'll say const, and we'll say use router, like that. And we'll just use the replace function. And now with replace, we can just say / like so. All right, so that's our authentication done on this page. So right now we are authenticated on it. That's why we have access to it. But if I click log out, and now we're back on the home page, and if I go to / entries, we will get sent straight back here. That's because it's doing that whole check to see like, are we authenticated? And we're coming up as unauthenticated, so it sends us back home. Let's just sign back in, sign in with GitHub, and we're back in. Let's go to entries. We need to add it to our nav bar as well. So let's do that too. So inside our components, we have navigation. Let's go ahead and set this to entries. All right, so now our nav bar is working. Okay, so that's the authentication part sorted out. Let's go ahead and add in the kind of meat of this page. So I'm going to go ahead and create an empty tag. And then in there, let's add the head. And that's coming from the next / head part. So this here on line 2 for me. And here we're just going to add the title, and we'll just say entries. And then let's go ahead and add a section right underneath that. And we'll say class name, and we'll give that a margin top of 32, flex, and flex column, justify center, and a gap of 10. Then we'll add in a heading, say entries, and let's just style that up. Class name, put it in the text in the middle, font Poppins, text for Excel, font bold, and say text neutral 50. All right, if we head back, there we go. We have our entries heading. Now let's go ahead and, so like I said earlier, is if the user does not have any entries, then we want to kind of add a box that says you have no entries. So we don't just have this like empty, boring page which doesn't tell the user anything. So with that, inside of components, I'm create a new file and say no entries.tsx. Now with that, what we're going to do is go ahead and say const no entries, and we're just gonna, this is a simple function, doesn't do anything fancy, so I've just added the normal brackets. That way we don't need to write the return statement. And we'll say class name, and we'll say mx auto flex width. We'll give it size of say 3/4 of the screen width. Flex row, items in the center, so they're aligned. Justify center. Gap, give it a gap of 8. Let me just shrink that. Then we'll say rounded small. Border, and border we'll give it gray about 400. And then we'll say background, we'll have a slate 800 and give it some opacity divided by 30. And padding, we'll say 10. Font will have the lovely Montserrat. And then text LG, and on a medium screen we'll have it as width half. So half the screen width. All right, so that's a lot there. We can tidy this up in a second. But here, let's use a pencil icon, which is coming from the hero icons, which we installed earlier. And so the import is at hero icons /react/24/solid. And then we'll give that a width of say 40 and a class name of text gray 50. And let's just close that. And actually, we can get rid of this one. We can just throw that and put that in here, because the text is also going to be the same. And then just underneath, we'll add a paragraph tag and say you don't have any entries. And there we go. And let's just export this as well. So export default no entries. And back inside our index.tsx file, so in the entries directory, let's go ahead and just say no entries here. And it automatically imported for me the no entries component that we created. Now we can go back and we have this lovely message saying you don't have any entries. Remember, this is only going to be shown if the user has no entries, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. All right, so that's the entries page somewhat sorted out. Now, if you go here and you reload, all good. But now if we log out and we go to entries again, so you may have seen that it quickly kind of showed up and then sent us back. So what we can do is add like a loading screen so we don't see this. And what we'll do is inside of components, we'll create a new file. We'll just say loading.tsx. And then for that, what we'll do is just create another very simple functional component. And I'll do normal brackets instead of the curly brackets, say div. And in that div, we'll say class name, say flex, h screen, and justify center. And then we'll add inside that h1 loading, give it a class name m auto, font we'll set that to Poppins, the text we'll set that to 4XL, font we'll set it to bold, and text we'll set that to gray 50. Let's export that. Loading. And now if we head back to index.tsx, what we can do is use the same sort of logic that we have here. So when the session is authenticated, but instead of unauthenticated, we can do something like this. So if the session status equals loading, then return loading. So this whole session status can be really useful for these sorts of things because it just comes out of the box. If we go back and if I go to entries now, and if you do the same, you may also see like a quick, did that work? Entries. Yeah, you may have just seen like the entries very faintly, or the loading very quickly. And yeah, that should pretty much sort out the loading part. Go here. Yeah. So that's our loading done. For some reason, I don't know if it's my eyesight. It quickly shows that session status equals loading. I guess it's all right. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Just refresh the entire thing. All right, anyway, that's there. Anyhow, maybe we can come back and fix this later on. But anyway, let's go ahead now and work on the entries page. So the entry page itself. So the single entry page where the entry can be seen for the user. So what we'll have in here is, first of all, we want to make sure that the user is authenticated. And what we'll do there is we can do the exact same thing what we did in the entry page. So let's take this and go back to PID file. We need to import it, so I'm just gonna import it now and import the router as well. All right, so we'll say use effect, and then we'll say check the session status. And then what we'll add in here is if the status or session status equals unauthenticated, then replace, so it'll send them back home just like we did in the entries file. All right, let's go ahead now and yeah, let's go ahead and build the meat of the page. So let's add some enter there. So let's add an empty tag in there. We'll add the head and we'll say the title. We'll just say entry here. Then we'll have a section. We'll be coming back to this page a lot. So the styling of this page in particular will not be complete until we start adding in the backend stuff. So say 32, margin top 32, flex column, justify center, gap 10. All right, and yeah, let's just leave it at that for now. And we'll come back to this a bit later when we start adding in our TRPC routers. But all right, now the page does exist. So if we just sign in with GitHub, go to entries. So we've got entries page working. And if I just go to some random ID page based on entries, everything's working there. We don't get like a 404. All right, now let's go ahead and build out the write page. So for the when we want to write, we'll just have like a nice form where a user can write in their entry and they'll be able to save it. And so what we'll do is inside this directory, inside pages, we'll go ahead and create a new file and we'll call this one write.tsx. And now for the write one, what we'll do is first of all, create the component, write, and we'll return. And first, let's add in the head, say title, and we'll say write. All right, now let's go ahead and create the section just like we kind of did in the previous ones. And we'll add a class of margin top 32 flex column, justify center, and gap 10. And if I'm not mistaken, we have this exact same thing in the entry page as well. So let's just check. So in here, is it a match? Yeah, it's a match there. And we also have it in PID, I think. Yeah, it's the exact same there. So what we can do instead of repeating ourselves, we'll go to the globals.css file, create a new class and call it section container. Or we'll just call it container. And we'll say apply and then just paste that in. Now we can go back to PID. We can replace this with container. We can go to the index.tsx, replace that with the container. And also inside of write.tsx, we can do the exact same thing. So we'll say container there as well. Keeps it cleaner. All right, let's go ahead and add in our heading. We'll say write. Class name, we'll say text, center, font, Poppins, and text for Excel, font, bold, and text neutral 50. I think that's the same as the others. That it does annoy me if I get something like that inconsistent. Let's just go ahead and export default right. And now if we go back and let's go to the right page, there we go. And for some reason this is not in the center. Does that happen to every one of them? And did I miss something from the global CSS? Let's go ahead and check. So we have flex column, justify center. Why is that upset? Margin top 32, flex col, justify center, gap 10. Just refresh that. Yeah, that's not lining up in the center, is it? What would happen if I just take that and bring that back in here? Go back. Wait, am I going just crazy here? Let's go to the right page. I mean, I could edit all this out and make it look like as if this error never occurred, but sometimes it makes it a bit more human. Okay, for some reason that's working. I don't know why. That's working. Okay, never mind. Let's just keep it at that. Let's ignore that class. I don't know what's going on there. If you guys do pick it up, yeah, be sure to leave a comment in, because for the sake of this video, I guess it's probably not too much. It's not worth too much investigating in. But anyway, let's go back into the right page, and we have our section. Let's add in our H1. We'll say, oops, it's not the right page. This is a PID file. So right page here. And let's go ahead and create our form. And before we continue, let's go ahead and in the navigation, let's go ahead and add the href. So now right is working, entries, right. Okay, so back in write.tsx. So for the form, we can get rid of this action because we're not going to be dealing with that. And we'll add our class name, say flex width full, flex column, and justify center. Gap, we'll give it 5. And now in here, let's add a text area. The name and ID we don't need, although it is good practice to have it in. Let's just leave it out for now. Give the column, say 30 rows. Let's leave it at 10. Why not? And then in the class name, let's go ahead and say class name mx auto rounded sm border slate, and we'll give that 800. Just shrink that. Background, we'll say gray 100. Padding, we'll say give it 5 all around. Font Montserrat, just in case you guys can't see that. Tracking, we'll say wide. Tracking wide. There we go. And we'll say on a desktop or bigger, we'll say width is going to be half. All right, now if we go back, there we go. We have it there right now. And is the rounded? Yeah, okay. Next, let's go ahead and add in the placeholder. So we'll say placeholder, write down your thoughts. And then we'll set this to required as well, because in order to submit it, you have to have some content in the text area. Then let's go ahead and create the button for submission. So button, we'll say type equals submit. And we'll give, let's set up the name actually, finish. And we'll say class name, give that mx auto, width 203, white space, pre-line, rounded, small. And the reason why I'm adding something like white space pre-line is because when you're writing something in a text area and you want to preserve the new lines, we want to do that. So that's why we're adding this in as well. And now let's go ahead and continue writing this. Let's give this a nice background gradient. So gradient to bottom right from gray 700. I'm using a lot of gray, but hopefully the website doesn't look too depressing. And then 800. Padding on the y-axis, we'll say 3. Then we'll go for font, Poppins, of course. The text, we'll have it as just extra large. Font, we'll set that to bold. Text, gray, 50. And on a desktop, we'll say width is 1/2. All right, so if we go back, we have this nice little finish here as well. And if we click on it, we'll say you have to write stuff down. If we write something down, today was a really nice day. Finish. It's not going to do much, but that's our form pretty much sorted out. Let's just add in our states. So let's go ahead here. And actually, yeah, let's first make sure that only a authenticated user can access this. So we'll say that the status is session status equals use session. And then in use effect, go ahead and do the exact same thing as we did earlier. So session status, and if the session status equals unauthenticated, then replace, we need that replace from our use router, so const use router, and we'll say replace that with a /. So send us right back home. All right, so that's that part sorted out, and we can also add a if session status equals loading, and then return loading. And all of these are being automatically imported for me. So again, if you want to check the imports, they're just here. It's about 5 imports that we have. And let's go ahead and add our use state. So we'll say const and then journal square brackets, journal entry, set journal entry, and that equals use state like so. And then down below, what we can do is say that the text area is going to contain the journal entry. So we'll say value equals journal entry, and on change, say value set journal entry. Oops. And that'll be value dot target dot value dot target dot value. Interesting. But yeah, that's our text area working. So now we can go ahead, type and finish. Doesn't do anything yet, but we'll go ahead and add the backend in later. But let's just go over what we've got. So we've got our home page, sign out button. We've got the entries page. We don't have any entries, but we've got a nice message telling us that. We can also write something, although we can't submit it. Now, if we log out, we have the logout working. And if we try go to the right page, it sends us right back. And for some reason, I don't know if this is something that I may have overlooked, but it does flash when it's loading. But anyway, yeah, I guess we could probably improve on that. And if you do find a nice solution, please feel free to drop it in the comments. But otherwise, that's the UI, or most of the UI is sorted out. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and start building the backend so we can start submitting our journals. And then later on in a video after that, we'll look at adding in our AI. But otherwise, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter as well. Add out all those links in the description. But otherwise, stay healthy, stay safe, and I hope to see you in the next video.